So thank you, Diana, and thank you to the City of Amsterdam for having us here today. My name is Dr. Maxwell, and I'm a professor of civil engineering at Gonzaga University, back in Spokane, Washington. I'm joined here by my colleague, Dr. Rhonda Young. I teach mostly in our sustainability and environmental engineering courses with a background in urban design, and Dr. Young is a transportation engineering professor. But we've been here actually for the past 3 weeks on a course called Sustainable Cities, and we're joined by 12 of our our civil engineering students. I always want to tag them as one of the sub-disciplines. But they're going to talk a little bit about what their experiences have been like over the past 3 years, or 3 weeks, learning about what we've seen all throughout the Netherlands, though we're based largely in Delft. So we're going to start by just kind of explaining who we are, in case you're not familiar with Gonzaga University, kind of where we're located in the States. Then we'll talk about more specifically why we were here in the Netherlands, what we've been up to over the past 3 weeks, and then ultimately how we're intending to use what we've learned back home. All right, so I'll hand it over to my colleague, Dr. Young.
Okay, so these are all students who are in engineering and in our School of Engineering and Applied Science, and more particularly in civil engineering. But if you're not familiar with Gonzaga University, we are a small private Jesuit university in Washington State, so not Washington, D.C., Washington State, on the west side, 430 kilometers to the west of Seattle. So an urban area, population of about 200,000 with a metro population of about 500,000. So Gonzaga University has 5,000 undergraduate students, and a big portion of those, 770, are in the School of Engineering and Applied Science. So we are right in Spokane, so we're an urban campus right on the beautiful Spokane River. So with that, we're going to pass it off to our students to let talk to you.
Hello everyone, my name's Brooke, and I'm just going to give you a quick explanation of why we chose to study in the Netherlands for the past 3 weeks. Back in Spokane, we take an introductory course on sustainability through our engineering curriculum, and we really don't get to experience or witness how the application of sustainability is integrated into modern design. And so we are really excited about studying here because of the unique ways that engineers and the other built environment professionals are able to apply sustainability into helping improve modern infrastructure throughout the world, and particularly in the Netherlands. As you can see from these pictures, it wasn't all just schoolwork. We had lots of fun exploring various cities throughout the Netherlands, especially our Holland home of Delft. And there's lots of activities that my peer here, Lily, is going to explain.
While we were based in Delft, we also spent a lot of time exploring the Netherlands and studying sustainability and urban design projects in cities such as Utrecht, Rotterdam, and Rijswijk. Some of our course curriculum activities range from the theory behind the sustainable city all the way to walkability assessments and integrated mobility planning. But while we would love to talk about all of that with you all today, we're really just going to focus on 2 main topics: our bike facilities assessment and our walkable streetscape design analysis that we conducted in rural and urban streets throughout Delft. In the following slides, my peers will present the purposes of these field exercises, the methodologies applied, and the results that we obtained. And rolling along, I will give the floor to Olivia's group to talk about the bicycle facilities assessment. Thank you.
Okay, so the first outing we went on here in Delft was the bicycle facilities assessment. And we... Oh, sorry. Great slide. Okay, so we rode, for 2 days, we rode to 13 different road segments around Delft, as shown in those 2 maps. And we learned how the different biking facilities function here in the Netherlands. So it was a perfect first assignment because, to be honest, I was a little bit shaky on the bikes at first. And so it was good to be able to explore the city in this way. On this trip, we learned about the different bicycle signals that indicate bicycle areas, and then we also learned about proper biking etiquette. We went to a variety of biking locations, including that range from busier streets with cars, trams, and construction to longer uninhibited bike highways. After the 2 days, we used the data that we collected to each compile an individual report about the bike facilities that we saw. And for each road segment that we visited, we wrote about the users of the road, the historical context of the road, the safety of the segment, and also the design of the road. And now I'm gonna, Bowen here is gonna talk about data collection.
So at each different of the 13 stops, we did various forms of data collection for our report. We started by using the measuring wheels you can see there to measure various things such as bike lane width, the road width itself for cars, at red lights how long you had a spot to queue with your bikes, and various other things like that to compare to what we were used to. And then we also observed the modes of different transport modes interacting, specifically intersections, so how pedestrians, bikes, cars, public transport all interacted and flowed in a seamless way with the separation but still connected. And then we also looked at the local land use for the roads to see what kind of area around it. So if it was like near the university, maybe there was more students there biking faster, or kind of out a little bit farther, slower, uninterrupted places where you can bike versus downtown, and the different rider types that came with those areas, and factored all of that. We put all that together in our comprehensive report, kind of going over each of the previous sections that Olivia talked about. And next I'll pass it on to Matt.
Okay, so when comparing the bicycle facilities between the US and Netherlands, we observed many things, but here I'm going to focus on the differences in safety while cycling in between the two countries. So many cities in the US have very limited areas designated for biking, which leads to very few people choosing to cycle there just because they would be forced to ride with cars, which isn't necessarily the safest option. So looking at the specifics with the lane widths, you can see that the lane widths for both car lanes and bike lanes are wider in the US than they are here in the Netherlands. This is especially noticeable with the width of the car lane, which is approximately half a meter wider in the US. While that may give the impression that it is safer to cycle in the US than the Netherlands, many of the drivers in the US don't know how to react to cyclists being on the road, which increases the risk of accidents. And another thing that is utilized more in the Netherlands is other types of bicycle infrastructure, such as cycle tracks and bike highways, which keep the bikes completely separate from the cars, and which is a much more safer option that is rarely seen in the US. And now Darian will wrap up our discussion on bicycle facilities.
So while the goal of the bicycle facilities assignment was to analyze the way the bicycle infrastructure in the Netherlands operates, we also took a lot more away from it. By the second day of the assignment, we were already comfortable traveling around Delft by bike. By the end of the program, we were going as far as 58 kilometers in a day to the coast to see the sand engine and the sea gates. And in addition, we were starting to blend in as much as 14 people on matching bikes could. And at the end of our 3 weeks, we were really sad to leave our bikes and the easy navigation of Delft and head back to the US, but we look forward to the opportunity to integrate infrastructure like the Netherlands into our cities. And so transitioning from cyclists to pedestrians, McKenna is going to step us through the walking streetscape design analysis assignment we did.
Alright, so as Darian just mentioned, our next task was looking at walkability and pedestrian infrastructure. So walkability is the measure of how conducive a place is for pedestrian activity, which can include walking, sitting and eating, and socializing. And so the main goal of this assessment is to better understand what makes an area attractive and enjoyable for pedestrians. And so we looked at 5 different unique urban design qualities, which include imageability, transparency, human scale, complexity, and enclosure. And so we looked at these different qualities in 4 different streetscapes throughout Delft. They ranged from quiet residential areas to more busy commercial neighborhoods. And as you can imagine, each one came up with very different walkability scores in terms of those urban design qualities. And so those will be further explained by my classmates, starting out with Stephen.
So the street segment that I was tasked with analyzing was in a mixed-use commercial residential area in Delft. And the main element that made it especially walkable was the human scale. And human scale has to do with the physical elements on the street that are proportional to human size and the speed at which they walk. So in the image you can see vendor signs, bike racks, and lots of windows which indicate activity in the buildings. Other things that contribute to human scale are things like street lights, chairs and tables, anything for pedestrian use or that pedestrians can see. All of these things, when you put them on a street, just make it more comfortable to walk on as a pedestrian. Hannah's going to go ahead and talk about a couple other elements that contribute to walkability.
Thanks. So yeah, my streetscape analysis, my sample location was an alley in central Delft, which had quite a few people, pedestrians passing through, as well as cyclists. The one aspect that I noticed most in this street was the transparency, and transparency is what you can see beyond the edge of the sidewalk. When measuring something like this, you look at the pedestrian level windows, and you definitely look at storefronts, because this allows you to see the activity inside, and it allows you to determine if a space is active and used by people or not. Another aspect I noticed was enclosure in this area. Enclosure is it's a measure of the verticality of the area. And so in this case, you can see all of the buildings are very tall, and because of the narrow road, it provides a more compact space compared to more of an open area. And so you take this into consideration when talking about pedestrian and cyclist movement in it. Passing it off to Ian here to share his
Okay, so my location is the 4th location. It was on a road I can't pronounce, but it was a busy street in a highly dense residential area. Part I was tasked with analyzing was complexity. Complexity is like the visual richness of an area that depends on different architectural styles, like colors of buildings and human activity. This street section lacked a little bit in complexity, although it did have one piece of street art and some colors in the buildings. Overall, the walkable streetscapes design analysis that we did showed us that walkability depends on more than just the macro scale design influences like proximity to transit. And moving right along, I'm going to pass on to our closing group, who will tell you about future work for our experience.
So for the final component of our study abroad course, we are taking the lessons that we learned here and applying them to cities or neighborhoods in the United States through a case study. For my case study, I've chosen the Logan neighborhood in Spokane, Washington, which is home to our university. And taking one of the lessons that my peers just spoke of, I've decided to focus on the multimodal transportation infrastructure, or the lack thereof it. So we have on the bottom picture one of the main collectors that runs through the neighborhood, and you can see there are bike lanes there, but they do not come anywhere comparison to what we've experienced here as far as safety and ease of use. But in the top picture is our main arterial, and along the 2 arterials that run on either side of the neighborhood is where all of, or the majority of the amenities and neighborhood centers that community members need access, whether it be grocery stores or restaurants and that. and they are dangerous to travel by bicycle because there are no bike facilities on these arterials. So as part of my case study, I'm going to make design intervention proposals to build bike facilities on these arterials to increase the mobility of the neighborhood. I hand it off to Ryan, who's going to discuss another case study in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Yeah, so I'm going to look at a neighborhood on the west side of Milwaukee, which is close to Chicago. And so the neighborhood's called Avenues West. It's where Marquette University is. And so immediately around the university, there's kind of this bubble of like pretty dense neighborhood. You can see some like mid-rise new construction, really active storefronts. And so it's like a very pedestrian-friendly area. But just like, 10, 15 blocks west and north, you can see the lower picture. The roads get pretty wide. There's a lot of like 4-lane roads, a lot of vacant lots, empty storefronts, and it's a much less pedestrian-friendly area. And then also just interestingly, the neighborhood's pretty bike-friendly for a poor neighborhood in Milwaukee. There's a couple of routes in the both east-west, north-south directions, but it's definitely nothing like Chicago or definitely not the Netherlands. So, obviously, can't tell you about everything we did over the last 3 weeks, but we have kind of been chronicling our journeys in a blog. So there's some cool pictures in there. Some of them were kind of funny. And with that, thanks for listening. If there are any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. I'll just try to.
So if you go to the previous slide, for example, what did you think like, oh, I'm definitely going to add this in the street?
I guess going from like fenced off parking lot, you'd almost think like anything would be an improvement. But I guess like in my mind, the goal, like the upper picture I think is great because it shows there's like affordable restaurants and affordable housing for the students. And I don't know, I think a block or maybe just the corner behind it, there's a great burger restaurant with a bar. So just like creating destinations for pedestrians, I think is a big part of it. But then I guess to improve even the top would be to kind of activate the street front. So something that, I think I saw a ton here is like these like tables on the sidewalk, just like people like on the street. And that is definitely not something that goes storefront, a couple feet of sidewalk, and then it's straight into the parking. So I think just activating the street front, getting people on the street.
And crossing to the other side.
Yeah, definitely.
Or trees. Trees.
Yes.
That's what I miss in the English.
Yeah.
Definitely. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.